Good morning, everybody. It is 7 o'clock. A storm over social care that just won't go away for the Prime Minister, with anger from his own backbenches growing, despite the plans getting backing in a vote late last night. We'll be joined today by the former Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt. Plus, we'll speak to the Labour MP, Sarah Owen, a member of the Health Select Committee. Also this morning, the first details emerge of the victims of the Christmas parade tragedy in Wisconsin. We'll bring you those from our correspondent at the scene. And give a dog a phone. We'll talk to the scientist who has invented a device that means owners and dogs can stay in touch. They literally pick up the phone. Also,
filled with sadness and confusion, what becomes of the
who sang that originally? You remember, don't you? Of course you do. And taking on a classic, Misha Paris tells us why she agreed to a cover version of one of Motown's greatest ever hits. It's Tuesday, the 23rd of November. Devastated to lose 3 passionate grannies, tributes as the first victims of the Christmas parade tragedy are named. A candlelit vigil for the 5 people killed by a speeding SUV is held as the community tries to pick up the pieces.
Overwhelmed, mystified, horrified, and wondering how could it happen, and now how do we move forward?
Bulgaria, bus fire, at least 46 people dead, including children, as tourists return from a holiday trip. MPs back the government's plans for social care reforms, but a bad day for Boris, as a lot of his own MPs don't like them.
I'm here in the heart of Europe. Austria enters its 2nd day of lockdown, and in Germany there's a stark warning from the health minister as COVID rates rise across the continent.
Probably by the end of this winter, pretty much everyone in Germany, it has sometimes been said somewhat cynically, will have been vaccinated, recovered or died. But it's true.
Selling jabs to rich countries, Sky News challenges the boss of Astrazeneca over its plan to make profits.
We will, of course, adapt to every circumstance, and countries that have low purchasing power will be supplied at no profit or very low price, and others will pay a bit more.
Downing Street criticised the targeting of J.K. Rowling by trans activists who posted her home address on social media. Good morning, everybody. The first details of the people killed during a Christmas parade in Wisconsin are emerging as victims were named. The Dancing Grannies, as they were called, performance group, said its members are devastated to have lost 3 extremely passionate grannies. Last night, a candlelit vigil took place from where Joe Pike reports.
24 hours after the city came together to celebrate, they returned to remember.
Now we will read the names of the 5 beautiful souls that were lost yesterday.
Wilhelm Hospel,
Virginia Sorensen,
Leanna Cohen,
Tamara Durand,
Jane Coolidge.
This time the authorities were taking no chances, using trucks to block the roads as thousands gathered for a candlelit vigil. The chief of police among those paying their respects. How is Waukesha feeling tonight?
Right now we're mourning, right? And we're going to move forward in the future and heal. This is a very resilient community, and I'm very proud and honored to be a member and part of this community.
Overwhelmed, mystified, horrified, and wondering how could it happen, and now how do we move forward?
This event shows what Waukesha really stands for, and how the people care for each other.
On Sunday night, the first sign of trouble was the screams. As a large car tore through the crowd of families, hitting adults and children again and again and again.
I heard and saw the people being hit, but what you could do more than seeing is hearing, and just that sound was insane.
Those injured including toddlers and 3 sets of siblings. Neil Stolzmark has run the karate studio here for 40 years.
Everyone was just crying and screaming, and I ran out to try to help the victims.
One man, a 39-year-old Darryl Brooks, is in custody. His criminal record stretches back decades. Police want to charge him with 5 counts of first-degree intentional homicide when he appears in court later today. There are few signs now of the horror that happened on this street beyond some police markings on the ground. And yet the pain, the confusion, the shock is everywhere in this small commuter town. Everyone in Waukesha seems to know someone who's been affected. The theme of this year's parade was comfort and joy. But in the last 24 hours, this town has witnessed trauma and tragedy that it will never forget. Joe Pike, Sky News, Waukesha, Wisconsin.
In other news, at least 46 people have died after a bus caught fire on a motorway in Bulgaria. The vehicle was carrying tourists who were returning from a weekend holiday in Istanbul in Turkey to Skopje in North Macedonia. The accident happened on the Struma motorway in Bulgaria, 45 kilometres west of Sofia. Not clear yet how the vehicle caught fire. The Bulgarian caretaker Prime Minister called it a huge tragedy. These are the latest pictures that we are receiving from the scene. As I said, not yet clear exactly what happened, but the accident and fire did happen at 2 o'clock in the morning local time near the village of Bosnek, southwest of the capital, Sofia. Germany's health minister has given the nation a stark warning regarding the spread of COVID-19. He said by the end of the winter, almost everyone will have been vaccinated, recovered or dead. Goodness. Adam Parsons is in Vienna for us this morning. Hello to you, Adam. Pretty stark warning there. Good morning.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's a very interesting intervention from Jens Spahn. Germany, of course, did very, very well in the first wave of the pandemic and received global plaudits. But this time around, the picture is quite different. Infection rates are going up fast in Germany. Largely, this wave of infection is coming from the east. Saxony at the moment is very badly hit and is heading towards the west. And the nervousness, of course, is that intensive care units, which at the moment in the west are in some cases really quite sparsely attended, will get fuller and fuller, and the knock-on effect will be people getting infected, potentially dying, filling up those intensive care units, and that familiar story of operations not being done on other people. And remember, at the moment, Germany is in a political state of flux. Angela Merkel is still the caretaker chancellor until coalition government is put in place, and there have been claims that actually leadership has really fallen away recently. Hence now Jens Spahn jumping into that void. Now, this is a man who is not known, I think, for jumping out and making extraordinary sort of proclamations. But here he was reflecting on the state of the pandemic at the moment and his fears for the country. I think we can hear what he actually had to say.
Wahrscheinlich wird am Ende dieses Winters.
Probably by the end of this winter, pretty much everyone in Germany, it has sometimes been said somewhat cynically, will have been vaccinated, recovered or died. But it's true. With the highly contagious Delta variant, this is very, very likely. And that's why we are recommending vaccinations so urgently, even the first vaccination, because whoever is not vaccinated will get infected without protection.
Pretty stark stuff, that, from Jens Spahn. Now, what I think he wanted people to hear was that the Delta variant is very infectious. I think actually what a lot of people will hear is that these are your choices. Either get vaccinated or you are going to catch this and potentially you are going to die. And I would say that I think this is a theme you're seeing across Europe, is that politicians really trying to hit people around the head who haven't been vaccinated. And really, I think there is a divide growing between the political establishment and the large section of societies, often up to a third of people in the country, who haven't been vaccinated. And that discourse, that lack of conversation between those two sides, I think is going to have big political and social impacts in the months to come.
OK, Adam, for now, thanks very much. Thanks a lot. Well, the boss of the British pharmaceutical firm, which invented one of the most commonly used coronavirus vaccines, has said the company will continue providing the jab for free to poorer nations. Astrazeneca had been criticised after it said it would start to make a profit from the treatment. The chief exec told Ian King the firm needed to recoup some of the vast sums of money it had spent on developing the vaccine.
For a large proportion, we spend about $7 billion a year, and quite a large proportion of our R&D investment goes to the UK, close to probably a third, but it's a very substantial investment we make every year in the UK.
Now, obviously, during the last year, AstraZeneca has become a household name to people who would never necessarily have previously known about you and what you do. How difficult has your job been, given the criticism that you've had from some politicians?
Well, you know, our job is in the industry is really to focus on the science and the best science to develop products, and we always focus on this. And we will be criticized because some of our projects fail, and you know, we have been lucky enough in the last few years. Our productivity has been high, and we have had more successes than we have had failures. But failures happen, and we get criticized. Typically, we get criticized by investors or the media, but it's part of our life.
Now, until now, you've provided the COVID vaccine at cost. You've just said that you're going to start seeking a modest profit from it. That's because you want to channel some of those profits into the antibody COVID treatment.
Yeah, I mean, we've always said that we would supply this vaccine at no profit for a period of time. And by the end of this year, we should be close to 2.5 billion doses of vaccine at no profit. And we still have orders to deliver at no profit next year. And we are transitioning progressively to a profit position with new orders. And so that will have an impact next year.
What will inform the decision-making as to which countries, which territories you seek to make a profit from?
Oh, actually what we said is that we will have a tiered pricing policy, and that will go from no profit pricing all the way to profit pricing. And even the profit pricing will be generating a modest profit. But for people for countries, at the low end of economic resources, we will make no profit, and then we will have a different pricing policy according to how rich the country is.
Well, certainly a lot of doses have been used in the UK. Let's give you the latest COVID data, should we? This is what it's looking like. 44,917 new cases of the virus. A further 45 people have sadly died, which means the total number of people who have died within 28 days of a positive test is 143,972. 16,500 people received their first dose of a vaccine in the last day, while the number of people receiving their second dose, nearly 14,000. More than 46 million people have now had 2 doses of a vaccine. And as far as the booster is concerned, almost 238,000 booster and third jabs, taking the total number of those doses to more than 15 million. Government getting on track now with that. Joined now by Labour MP Sarah Owen, a member of the Health Select Committee. Hello to you, thanks for joining us. Should we start with COVID while we're just talking about it there? Apparently there's another new variant, the AY.4.2. I'm sure it'll get another catchier name, but how worried should we be about it?
I think all the while that we do not take a global response to the pandemic, we are in a global pandemic, the clue's in the title, and we need an international response. So moves from AstraZeneca that you were talking about just now are very welcome, because we need to ensure that everyone across the world has access to a vaccination.
And as far as what's happening in Germany and Belgium and Vienna is concerned, how worried should we be when we cast our eye across the channel?
I think we have always got to be scanning the horizon for new variants, for changes and possible solutions, new solutions for dealing with this pandemic. And we can't take our eye off the ball, particularly as we're staring down the barrel of winter again.
Yeah, I do want to go on to ask you about social care, but just a final thought from the Education Secretary, Nadeem Zahawi. He so far rejected calls for exclusion zones around schools. They were supposed to be put in place to protect the youngsters from anti-vaxxers who, some of them come and cause issues for the parents and the kids as they're going to and leaving school. Do you have a view on that? Should it already be in place?
Children should just be able to go to school. I think they've had the horrible last 2 years. The last thing they should be doing is being confronted with people who are being aggressive or who are looking to threaten them or teaching staff or their parents. It's completely unacceptable. Children should just be able to go to school.
Talk to me about the social care bill. It passed yesterday. You Labour criticised the bill. What's the alternative?
Well, what we saw last night was absolutely shocking. And you saw a number of Conservative MPs rebel and are completely disgruntled with this as well, because they see the inherent unfairness. We were told that no one would have to sell their home to pay for social care. And last night, the Conservatives broke that promise. People with the most modest incomes, with the most modest households, will be losing the most out of this. And that is completely unacceptable. And it doesn't even solve the social care crisis that we're currently facing. It's completely nonsense.
It's a better situation than we're in at the moment, though, is what the government would say in response to that.
People deserve better. They were promised something and they've got completely the opposite. And when we're looking at the social care agenda, none of this even solves the problems that people are facing right now. We've got 120,000 social care worker vacancies. That could increase as we see workforce burnout, which we discussed on the Health Select Committee. None of these issues are addressed in the health and care bill that they're bringing forward or the vote that they had last night.
Talk to me about what Labour would do, though. You know, it's easy to criticise the government, but what would Labour do in response? In your manifesto back in 2019, you suggested to fund free personal health care, as they do in Scotland, and that would cost, I think, something like £6 billion a year?
Well, we wouldn't be charging and punishing those with the most modest incomes and allowing people with millions of pounds worth of wealth to not be touching any of this or paying their fair share. I think we have to look at a long-term funding strategy for social care, and that involves looking at the wealthiest within our society paying their fair share. How can it be that somebody with assets of £100,000 only is left with 20,000, yet somebody with £500,000 would be left with 414,000? That is completely nonsensical, and that is the opposite of what Labour would be doing.
Because they've bought their property, because they've earned more money during the course of their lifetime, and they've paid tax on that money, and now they're at the end of their, towards the end of their life or the end of their years, and as a result, they have earned what they've got.
I completely don't accept that argument in terms of somebody working harder. People work hard for whether it's a flat.
I didn't say, no, you mustn't put words in my mouth. I didn't say that at all. I didn't suggest for 1 second that they were working harder. I was just saying that they had worked hard all their life, and as a result, they had, been lucky enough to get a job that was well paid. But as a result of that, they've paid significantly higher taxes than other people, and they want to live comfortably with the money that they have paid tax on towards the end of their lives.
And there are a group of people within society, some of the wealthiest, who are making funds, not out of an income in terms of going to work in the same way that you or I would, but are making money out of wealth, out of shareholding, out of pension funds, out of hedge funds. And actually, we should be looking to other means and being a bit more innovative when it comes to how we fund our social care. And it's not just about the money that's coming in. It's about how the system works. And at the moment, we're asking the poorest and those with the most modest incomes and middle incomes to pay into a social care system which is fundamentally broken, and this does not solve it.
So a wealth tax.
I think when you're looking at the wealthiest, you can call it a wealth tax, but it's ultimately looking at a much fairer system of taxation than what we currently see, because we are seeing a double whammy. People are being hit on national insurance, people are being hit with their potential of having to sell their homes or the majority of their home and their wealth. And these are ordinary working people. Many of them would have been working in the healthcare sector, for example, and we are asking the wrong people to pay into a system which is fundamentally broken.
Am I not right in saying that the top 5% of earners in the country pay 90% of the tax or something like that?
I think this is, again, about fairness. And we were promised, the Conservatives promised, and Boris Johnson promised the electorate, and people voted on the basis that they wouldn't have to sell their homes to pay for social care. And last night, that is what they whipped their MPs to do, and that is an utter disgrace.
Yeah, but these people who you're talking about, who've got their big houses, what my point is that many of them, not all of them, I get your point, but many of them have worked hard all their lives for those houses, and you're saying that they should have those taken off them?
No, I think that what we're saying is that there is a fairer way of doing it. We don't want to see anybody lose their home because of it. But ultimately, right now, we're seeing people with millions of pounds worth of assets being able to retain 90% of that. And somebody who is in a 2-bedroom or terraced house in the Midlands or in the north of the country, they would have to lose absolutely everything. And that is a very unfair way of doing things. I don't think it's justifiably fair. I think anybody looking at it would say that's not the way to do things, and we can do things much better. People have worked incredibly hard, or they've saved, and yes, everybody would have done that. But those with the broadest shoulders should have to bear the burden.
Yeah, I hear you, but my point is that they've already had quite a heavy burden of taxation during the course of their life. I'm asking you, because I've put that to the government yesterday, of course, no one should lose their homes, and that's what the government, one of the planks that the government won this election on, and you know, economical with the actuality, as I put to the minister yesterday. But I'm asking you, given that you're representing Labour this morning, what Labour would do.
I've mentioned and I told you already that I think that people with income that get it from wealth, from shareholders, from pensions,
give me more detail.
from those
what
dividends,
does that look
those
like?
sorts of things. And I think
like?
that would look like people on modest incomes and with modest earnings and with modest households not having to sell the majority of their assets or their homes.
But how do you pay for it?
I've said that those with the biggest incomes should have to pay for it. And I think that that is a fundamentally much fairer way of looking at it. And it needs to be not just knee-jerk. What we're seeing right now is knee-jerk. It's not a long-term solution.
How should they pay for it? Tell me how they should pay for it.
Solution. We need to be looking at tax and taxing those that are the wealthiest in society. Because what we've seen now an increase on national insurance. We've seen an increase in national insurance, and now you are asking people with most modest incomes who are working in low to middle income jobs to pay again.
That's not my question.
Be unfair.
Taxing them how? How would you tax richer people?
You can tax richer people. There are models for doing that in other countries, and there are also big earners throughout this pandemic. Most working people have really struggled for the last 2 years. Yeah, when you look at the likes of Amazon and some of the big companies that have made huge profits out of the last 2 years, we should be looking at taxing those companies because they are currently...
That's not what you were saying to start with. You were talking about taxing rich people who've got big houses, and now you're talking about taxing Amazon.
Okay, you asked for another way of possibly raising those funds. I've given you two perfectly reasonable explanations.
Richer people. I'm asking you how you do that.
I've given you two reasonable explanations, and those are looking at the wealthiest.
They may be reasonable to you, but they're confusing. So I'm asking you to clarify.
I'm not entirely sure how it's confusing.
Let me ask you again. How do you tax richer people? By a penny on income tax? By a wealth tax? How are you suggesting that you tax people who've got bigger houses?
I think
by a mansion
the same
tax?
way. Well, the Tories have managed to be able to find a way to tax working people and tax people on lower incomes yet again. I'm pretty sure that a Labour government would be able to find a way of sharing that burden much fairer and in a much fairer way for everybody in the country, which actually solves the social care crisis, not this.
In other words, you don't know.
Do you know, I've just given you two reasonable explanations, looking at those that have actually made huge profits over the last 2 years out of a pandemic and out of a healthcare crisis fundamentally, which they should be paying their fair share in, and not asking people that have already been taxed again with the national insurance increase and people that have saved and worked really hard throughout their working life to afford a home that is more modest than others.
OK, so people who've got a big house, how are you going to tax them?
When we're talking about a wealth tax, or we are talking about taxing the wealthiest, there are many ways of doing that. And I think that ultimately we should be focused on making this the fairest way possible. And this isn't what we've got. We could be doing lots of different things, taxing people that, for example, make their wealth out and their income out of wealth rather than productivity, rather than going to work in the same way that we all pay tax. And I think that would be a much fairer way of looking at it, because it cannot be justifiable that somebody with £100,000 loses all but £20,000 of their wealth. How can that be justifiable? And last night, what we saw was a number of Tories,
and
not just Red Wall,
but I'm asking you, what do people with big houses do? What do you want to happen? And you're being ideological and you don't have an answer.
I think that is completely unfair. I've told you two ways of doing it.
Okay,
whether it is
let me just ask you one more time. How do people with big houses pay more so that people who don't have as much money don't have to lose their properties? Just give me one way that would happen. Are we talking about a mansion tax?
So the same way that the Tories are penalising and taxing the poorest and the most modest incomes in our society. Why is it that you're saying that the Tories are able to tax those with modest houses, yet they wouldn't be able to tax those with the biggest wealthy houses? So why is it that they would be able to do it, yet Labour wouldn't be able to do it for those that are the most wealthy? I think that there is always a way around it. And if the Conservatives can tax those on the most modest incomes and working class people, we would be able to find a way to tax people that have got the most wealth and do that in the fairest possible way.
OK. Just before I let you go, have you been to Peppa Pig World? The Prime Minister says it's fabulous.
No, I have not been to Peppa Pig World, and I'm not entirely sure the CBI conference was the place to raise what you do on your break.
OK, it's good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us on the programme. Come down and see us. We'd love to have you in the studio. It's great to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay.
Thanks a lot. From Pages, this is how they are treating the social care story this morning. The Guardian says Mr Johnson delivered a rambling speech to business leaders. It quotes several Conservative MPs as casting doubt on Mr Johnson's ability to lead the party after what one former Cabinet Minister describes as a pretty bad fortnight. The Metro says the Prime Minister made a Peppa Pig's ear of the speech. It compares his address to Theresa May's infamous 2017 conference speech in which she developed a bad cough and when her party logo fell off the wall. Do you remember that? And the Daily Star asks, could someone at number 10 please check on Bozo Johnson? Its headline verdict on the speech, a pork pie short of a picnic. That's quite funny, actually. Still to come on the programme for you, could Germany use mandatory vaccinations to stop the new wave of COVID infections? We'll talk to a leading German scientist shortly. Joined by campaigner after she won one of the most prestigious environmental awards for her work in Madagascar, the latest on that. And animal rights campaigners tell us why they are protesting against the Queen's Guard's bearskin caps worn by British soldiers. Also this morning for you, the funeral of the murdered MP Sir David Amess will take place this morning. Thousands of people, including politicians from all parties, are expected to join his family for the service at Westminster Cathedral. The actor Kevin Spacey and his production company have been ordered to pay more than $30 million to the studio that made the hit Netflix show, House of Cards, after he was fired following sexual harassment allegations. He's denied all the accusations against him made over the last few years. J.K. Rowling has revealed that her address was made public by a group of activists who took photographs of her home and posted them on Twitter. Ashna is in the newsroom for us. Ashna, tell us more about what happened. Good morning.
Good morning. The author has repeatedly been making headlines for her views on transgender rights. If you remember last year, she wrote a particularly polarising article where she took issue with the phrase people that menstruate when referring to people instead of talking about women. But this revolves around a photo that 3 activists took outside the author's home, but that she says clearly depicts her address. And in it, she says that tweets responding to it, she has said, over the last years, I have watched appalled as many women, and she goes on to name a number, have been subject to campaigns of intimidation, which range from being hounded on social media, the targeting of their employers, all the way up to doxing and direct threats of violence, including rape. I have now received so many death threats, she said. She said, I could paper the house with them and haven't stopped speaking out. Doxing, it's worth mentioning, is a form of trolling. It's essentially putting out someone's private information with malicious intent. Downing Street has also condemned this photograph and says that no one should be targeted in that way. And the Twitter accounts of all 3 of those individuals have temporarily been suspended.
OK, lovely. Thank you, Ashla. Thank you. If you're a nervous flyer, then look away now, as one airline not looking took on one of the last great challenges in aviation. You'll have to let me know what it looks like, because I'm not looking, Natasha, my director, I'm not looking. The charter airline Highfly has landed one of the biggest aircraft ever to touch down in Antarctica. The Airbus A340 flew from South Africa to the South Pole on the first regular supply flight of this year's summer season. It landed on the Wolf Fang runway, which is made up entirely of glacial ice. The remote location meant the plane also has to carry enough fuel for its return flight to Africa. Still not looking. Quick look at the weather.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Cold and fairly calm for the next day or so, with the risk of overnight frost, but it'll turn very unsettled to end the week. Central and southern parts are mostly clear, dry and frosty now, while the cloudier north is mainly frost-free.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Now, a Labour MP has this morning suggested on the programme that a wealth tax could be used to fund social care in England. 19 Conservative MPs last night rebelled against the government over its proposals for funding adult care. A short time ago, Labour MP Sarah Owen, who sits on the Health Select Committee, told me it might be necessary to raise taxes for the better off.
At the moment, we're asking the poorest and those with the most modest incomes and middle incomes to pay into a social care system which is fundamentally broken, and this does not solve it.
So a wealth tax?
I think when you're looking at the wealthiest, you can call it a wealth tax, but it's ultimately looking at a much fairer system of taxation than what we currently see, because we are seeing a double whammy. People are being hit on national insurance, people are being hit with their potential of having to sell their homes or the majority of their home and their wealth. And these are ordinary working people. Many of them would have been working in the healthcare sector, for example, and we are asking the wrong people to pay into a system which is fundamentally broken.
Tamara's here. She wouldn't double down on what the manifesto had said as far as Labour was concerned on how to pay for social care.
That's right. I think, Kate, the Prime Minister's clearly had a bad time yesterday. There was a big rebellion in the social care vote. 19 Tories voted against it. Dozens more clearly weren't convinced and didn't vote at all, including some big hitters like Theresa May and other former cabinet ministers. But given that, this social care stuff is hard. The Prime Minister has said, look, the system we've got at the moment is not fit for purpose. The system that he's proposing is not perfect. Clearly, there's a question about inequality, but it's more generous than what we've got now. What would Labour do about it? Well, when the Prime Minister first announced all of this some months ago and said we're going to have to raise everyone's national insurance in April next year to pay for it, Keir Starmer's response was that Labour would have a wealth tax. What does that mean? Well, clearly his MPs don't really know, because we don't know whether it's going to mean. He's talked vaguely about properties and about shareholdings, but exactly how it would work is not clear. And what is that going to fund? Labour say, we don't like this cap. The cap is not fair. So what's the alternative? When asked whether they would do what Jeremy Corbyn as leader promised in 2019, which is free personal care in England. That's what they've got in Scotland. So some of your care costs covered by the government. That's expensive, costs $6 billion a year. She wouldn't commit to it. Clearly, all these questions will need to wait for the next election, but Keir Starmer is going to keep getting those questions, because this is a difficult issue, and the government made that tough decision to raise national insurance. It's not going to be popular. People aren't going to like it. It raises £36 billion. Finding a wealth tax that raises that amount of money that people will accept might be a more difficult job than Labour expect.
Tomorrow's take. We got a tomorrow's take today?
Hopefully, at 9
o'clock. Look forward to it. Thank you. Now, the German health minister has warned people they should expect to have been vaccinated, recovered or died by the end of the winter. Much of Western Europe is in what the German Chancellor Angela Merkel has described as a dramatic fourth wave of COVID infections. Joining us now is Dr. Hajo Zeeb from the Leibniz Institute for Prevention, Research and Epidemiology. Hello to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Do you agree with the sentiment from the Minister?
Well, it's a very tough stance, I guess, but in principle, this is what we're heading for. It's we have high numbers of infections now, and I mean, this is clearly meant as a stark warning, I would say, and yeah, I think we need this at this point.
How concerned are you about the situation in Germany at the moment and the rising numbers?
Yeah, we really have a strong surge in numbers in many places in Germany. The numbers are excessively high. We haven't seen this through all the pandemic. So yeah, it's very concerning. And I mean, it's basically the hospitals again that are the bottleneck, and we are in trouble in some places, and we'll be in trouble in more places over the next months, really. Yeah.
When you say in trouble in what way? That the health service that you have in Germany is in danger of being overwhelmed, that business can't cope because not enough people are at work? In what way?
No, it's mainly the health system that's the consideration right now, because the intensive care units are really flooded already in some places, and they are clearly warning that this will get worse and that they will face, triage, that they have to select who can be treated and who cannot be treated, which is really something that they don't want to do at all. Business-wise, it's not such an issue at present, because most people, this is organized, and there's there are refunds for those people who cannot go to work. So this is not really so much of an issue, but it's also coming up, obviously.
The outgoing Chancellor, Angela Merkel, has said that the present curbs, though, are just not enough. What do you think?
Yeah, it's true. We are having a slightly different situation than in the UK, where you have been having these high numbers for quite some time now, and also took a different stance. Here, it's politically not acceptable, really. That's why people are really getting worried now, and are thinking about reducing the contacts mainly again, closing down venues and stuff like this, which hasn't been there for a while, but it's coming up now clearly, and also the question of this mandatory vaccination.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. What's your view on mandatory vaccination? I was speaking to a doctor about it, actually, from the World Health Organization just yesterday.
It's clear, so if we got along without it, it would be better, but it's getting tough, and it seems like we will have to go that path. There's the discussion is out there really now, which is the climate has really changed. The general opinion is tilting towards going for mandatory vaccination. It has its problems, it's clear, but we need 10% or 15% more vaccinated adults, and that's perhaps not something that we can reach otherwise.
And where are you with boosters? Are boosters as important to the people of Germany, or the everyday life of keeping the country running in Germany, as they appear to be here in the United Kingdom? 15 million thereabouts have had their vaccination out of, I'm trying to remember, a population of well over 65 million.
We're not that far. We started later with boosters, but there's a big surge now. The idea is to have more than 20 million people vaccinated until Christmas, which is a high number. I'm not sure that the system can be managed, because we actually closed down the vaccination centers. Now they have to be reopened. So these are things that need to be, or are being, changed as we talk, basically. But it's going to be a tough activity to get all this done in the next few weeks, really. But it is the main issue also now, boosting the already vaccinated. Yes.
And what are we thinking about any future lockdowns, or at least closing the borders of Germany? We've seen what's happening in Austria, of course.
Interestingly, the border issue is not such a big discussion as we had it last year, really. It's really the lockdown, the change in public life, such that only recovered and vaccinated people can take part in anything, basically. This, what we call 2G rule, is now becoming widespread, and that's something. But we have in Bavaria already these contact restrictions. People in some places cannot leave their home if they're not vaccinated, in fact. So we have restrictions, we have partial you can call it lockdowns in many places, and we'll probably have more of this coming up.
But what about as far as the borders are concerned? I mean, are you looking across the Channel to the United Kingdom and thinking they've got another variant in the UK? We don't want that pesky variant over here.
Yeah, even if we were looking, I mean, the variants, they are faster than what we can do anyway. So I think this discussion is not really at the top of the list. And presently, we are all in it jointly, and I mean, the vaccine will stop quite a lot of the infections, but closing borders, we've seen it really doesn't do a lot, especially not between the UK and Germany. I mean, this I don't think is on the agenda now.
And as far as getting rid of COVID, finally, getting rid of COVID altogether. We heard from our former vaccines minister who was speaking just yesterday, and he said the UK will be the first country to see the back of COVID-19. Do you have a view on that?
Well, UK is certainly ahead of some other countries because of the spread that the infection has had in the country, and the good vaccination numbers now both together will put you into an endemic state, not now, but maybe after the winter. But many countries actually are looking into this. Just read about India, that they are there as well, even some African countries where no vaccinations, but actually the surge of infections has gone through the population. So England and the UK are there and will be there in some months, but this will be a tough month ahead of us. In winter, it won't be easy, even for the UK and the NHS in particular.
And do you think boosters, sorry, I've got another question, I've thought of a follow-up. Boosters, do you think we might have to have them every year, like the flu vaccine?
It's not yet clear, but it's possible, really. I mean, we are going to have a basic level of immunity coming up more and more with these boosters, and maybe the actual variant will not be as severe anymore in the near future. So this is hard to say, but it's quite possible that we will need to get vaccinated, but we'll be in an endemic state, and maybe there will be sort of smaller outbreaks. We hope that this is all losing its threat, basically, over the next years.
Fascinating to talk to you, Doctor. Thank you so much for taking the time. Much appreciated.
Cheers. Thanks.
Thank you. One of the country's, UK's biggest refuse firms says it's seen a huge rise in the number of attacks on bin men during the pandemic. It says in some of the worst incidents, workers have been attacked with acid and baseball bats. What's that about? Shingi Maruriki reports.
Laszlo's work as a refuse collector is grueling. There are early starts, long hours, and of course, dealing with hundreds of households' waste every day. One thing he does not expect to face on this daily drive through North London, though, are death threats.
He said to me, if I'm not going to be delete that recording, he's going to kill me.
Last month, following company policy of not collecting rubbish placed in the wrong bin, saw him and his colleagues chased down the street.
During this period, the residents arrived with the bike, started to be breaking, and tried to break into the lorry, bang on the door, on the window. He's yelled on us, he's going to beat you, he's going to kill us, and if he's get in, he's going to be slice our throat off. So it's like that. So we driven off. We was very frightened at that point. When you actually wake up every morning and you think, oh, shall I go home in one piece today or not? Or how it is?
That trauma is now becoming far too normal, from verbal assaults to acid attacks and even having shots fired at them. Refuse collectors and staff working for the waste management company Veolia have reported a 118% increase in incidents like this in the last year. That is why the company are now taking action.
We're taking a proactive approach to working with police forces and local authorities so that our teams know how to engage with the police, how to support the police to lead to a successful prosecution.
And it's part of a bigger trend. After a year of key workers being celebrated for their work at the height of the pandemic, adulation has turned to abuse. 88% of shop workers have been verbally abused in the past year, while 58% of transport workers have been threatened, assaulted or spat at since the pandemic began. There's hope the law could be used as a deterrent.
It is a real shame that, after all of the heroic work by frontline workers across public services throughout the pandemic, and I think councils are saying with one voice that they will look to prosecute those who abuse their staff.
For people on the front line like Laszlo, promises of protection and more prosecutions are a vital step in making sure abuse is not part of the job. Shingi Marurike, Sky News, Tottenham.
A campaigner trying to protect rare species in Madagascar from extinction has been awarded one of the most prestigious international environmental prizes. Julie Razafmanak took the Tusk Award for Conservation for her work to preserve some of the most endangered creatures on Earth, and I'm pleased to say that she is with us now. Hello to you, Julie.
Hi.
Hi, did you meet Prince William?
Oh, yes. Very exciting. Yeah.
I'm sure. How was he? What did he say?
Well, he was encouraging us to continue working on conservation in Madagascar. It was not only me, it's the 5 winners and finalists of the task award. A huge privilege to meet him directly.
Yeah, I'm sure it must have been absolutely amazing. We know it's a subject that's very close to his heart. You're being honoured, as we know, with the award. What aspect do you think of your work are you most proud of, or is that just too difficult to say?
Well, there are many aspects of the work we are doing, creating protected areas in Madagascar, which has been difficult, but then we go through all the process. Saving the endangered species, for example, the golden mantella frog, which has been listed as critically endangered and now been downlisted to endangered. But I think another really important aspect of it is growing capacity of young conservationists in Madagascar, and also the communities which are living very close to these forests and the areas where the endemic species are found.
Yeah, and we were covering actually Madagascar on our programme a couple of weeks ago for COP26. Our Alex Crawford, one of our reporters, our specialist reporters, was there talking about climate change and the impact that it's having on Madagascar. I'm guessing you would agree with that.
Yes, definitely. There at the moment you can see like rivers drain up in Madagascar, which some of them I've never seen that before. And also in the south with the drought and famine, it's really a big challenge for us in Madagascar to adapt to it and to find a strategy to survive despite the changes.
Yeah. Just a quick thought before I let you go, Julie. What's next? You've won this amazing award. You've met Prince William. What are you going to do next?
Going back home. I have to go back and take this award to the communities we have been working with to get it. And then we'll have to continue pushing on youths and other communities to do more work in conservation. And of course, raising the capacity of my team so that we can do better
Julie,
in all aspects. Yeah. And do more.
Julie, we are out of time. I'm so sorry, but it's absolutely lovely to talk to you. Congratulations on your award and safe journey back home. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
What a wonderful girl. Coming up, all today's top stories here on The Breakfast Show on Sky. Stay tuned.